The Trial of Worth. Commander Yilrex of the observation vessel Luminous Intent hovered in quiet awe above Earth, his compound eyes twitching nervously as he reviewed the day's recordings. Around him, the other members of the expedition leaned in, their translucent neck fronds pulsing with anticipation. "This," he said, tapping one long claw against the holographic display, "is Subject 47B, designation, Marissa Cole. She has now engaged in what they call job hunting for 83 Earth days without securing a position." The observation chamber filled with a series of agitated clicks and low-frequency hums, tones of disbelief and amazement in the Ziltree lexicon. 83 days? Whispered subtechnician Frall, his crest flattening in disbelief. "That's longer than our gestation cycle." "Indeed," said Yilrex. "And today, she prepares again. Watch." The display zoomed in on Marissa Cole, a 32-year-old human in the midst of her morning ritual. She was perched at a small desk cluttered with coffee-stained notebooks, job listings, and something called a resume. With meticulous care, she tailored each version of this document to suit specific employers, agonizing over the exact phrasing of her past experiences as though decoding some arcane script. "Note the structure," Yilrex continued. "The resume condenses an entire life's worth of toil into a single page. This is then launched into the digital ether, where it is often ignored." Frall emitted a low, sorrowful whir. "They do this willingly?" "Willingly and repeatedly," Yilrex confirmed. "It is considered normal, even honorable." Just then, the feed displayed Marissa opening an email. The words, "We regret to inform you," appeared. The chamber fell silent. "She is rejected," said Yilrex solemnly. "This is the 28th rejection this cycle." The aliens watched as Marissa closed her eyes, sighed, and took a long drink from her steaming mug. Then, almost impossibly, she resumed editing another resume. "They do not stop," murmured Frall. "They never stop." Yilrex turned to the council, his voice low. "We believe their warlike nature was limited to physical combat. We were wrong. This is a psychological gauntlet. A trial by fire, not to destroy the enemy, but to endure annihilation of the self, again and again, without surrender." "But why?" asked linguist Zarn, voice trembling. "Why would a species evolve such cruelty against its own?" "To prove their worth," Yilrex replied grimly. "They call it the job market." The term echoed throughout the ship with ominous reverence. Yilrex flicked through recordings of other humans. One man had applied to over 200 positions, each time rebranding himself like a chameleon. Another had learned new skills online just to stay competitive in the grueling process. A third had faced 5 rounds of interviews for a single role, each more invasive than the last, until finally being told the company had gone in a different direction. "It is a winnowing," Frall whispered, "like the silt crabs of Velar Prime. Only the most persistent survive." Yilrex nodded. "And the reward?" The chamber turned to the screen again. Marissa was now in a video interview. Her back straight, smile painted on with hope, voice steady despite the visible exhaustion in her eyes. "We see them perform," Yilrex narrated. "Polite, enthusiastic, deferential. They answer complex questions meant to assess their psyche, logic, emotional regulation, sometimes asked to explain what they would do in hypothetical crises of illogical proportions." The interviewer on screen asked, "Can you tell me about a time you failed and how you handled it?" Frall twitched. "That's strategic psychological exposure. They force the candidate to relive trauma to prove resilience." "And what happens if they succeed?" Zarn asked. "They are hired," Yilrex said slowly. "Granted the right to exchange their labor for currency, but only conditionally. The position can be revoked. They can be discarded later with no consequence to the employer." "This is madness," Zarn bellowed. "It is ritualized madness," corrected Yilrex. "A rite of passage, the trial of worth." The chamber was quiet again as they observed Marissa receive a brief smile from the interviewer. "Thank you for your time," he said. "We'll be in touch." A phrase so often spoken that it had become a ghostly mantra, haunting and devoid of true meaning. Marissa disconnected, leaned back in her chair, and stared at the ceiling. Her shoulders sagged, but only for a moment. Then she opened a job board and clicked apply once again. "She continues," Frall murmured. "They all do," Yilrex replied. Despite the rejections, despite the lack of answers, despite the crushing silence of the void, Zarn stepped forward. We must update the Council's records. This changes our understanding of human society. They are not just survivors of environment, war, and plague. They endure systems built against their spirit, and they persist. There were solemn nods all around. Are their rewards greater than mere labor? Frall asked. Yilrex pulled up a new feed. Marissa had finally received an offer. The words, "We are pleased to offer you a position," appeared. The chamber stirred with hopeful excitement. Marissa stood up, hand over her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. She shouted for someone in another room, laughing. Moments later, a younger sibling ran in and hugged her. She celebrates, Frall said in wonder, as if victorious in battle. To win, Yilrex said softly, is to be acknowledged as worthy. That is the final prize. A fragile, conditional acceptance, but to a human, it means everything. Silence lingered before Zarn asked, "What shall we name this in the Grand Codex?" Yilrex closed his eyes and answered, "The trial of worth, a human right of endurance through self-devaluation and perseverance." The phrase was etched into the ship's records. As the aliens turned away from the observation display, a quiet reverence fell over them. No longer did they see humans as mere primitive bipeds of curious biology. They saw them now for what they truly were, creatures of terrifying tenacity, beings who stared into societal machinery that grinds down hope and walked willingly into its gears, and emerged, more often than not, with their spirit intact.